Talks of 2023. Very exciting. I am Zoe Licata. I am a reporter for Brewbound, and we're going to kick things right off here. But first, I wanted to give a very special thanks to Dogfish Head, our presenting sponsor, who helps make all these brew talks happen and puts these beverages in your hands. So thank you to them. Also to our, round of applause for Dogfish Head. I also want to thank our other sponsors, Reyes, Encompass, and ePremise for also helping make this happen. So we have a familiar face to the Brew Talks Denver stage up with us who's going to kick things off. We have Shawnee Adelson, who is the executive director of the Colorado Brewers Guild. Some of the profits from this event go to the local guild from wherever we hold it. So we want to check in and see where's that going and what's happening in the environment of where we are. So welcome back.
Thanks, Zoe.
Yeah. I think the best way to kick off this conversation is looking back at when we talked last year on this stage. You said the Colorado craft breweries were recovering, but still in recovery. What is the status of them today?
I think it depends on the brewery, honestly. We've seen a lot of our taproom breweries almost fully recover. But as you guys have covered, Bart Watson's mid-year report came out showing that it's a picture of craft beer that's not growing and maybe shrinking slightly. And although that's a national assessment, that is kind of what's happening in Colorado. So if you look at all beer excise taxes in Colorado, we've actually decreased 1% since 2019. Granted, that is all beer. And if you look at the first 6 months of this year compared to 2019, we're down actually 3%. But I want to put a caveat there, is that in 2019, that's when beer went into grocery. So those numbers may be slightly inflated. So it may not just be due to recovery, the pandemic, consumer shifting.
Another thing we talked about on stage last year was openings and closings, and openings were outpacing, and there was a lot of craft breweries in Colorado who were reinvesting in the area. They're putting second locations out. What does that look like now? Is that still happening?
Yes and no. I would say no to start with is that we actually have less breweries in Colorado right now than we did at the beginning of the year, unfortunately. But that's only a couple, so it's very small. And we are still seeing breweries open up second locations. Left Hand, I think they're here, they opened up their second location in Rhino just after GABF last year, and we're about to see Prost open up a very large production facility just north of here. Four Noses is about to open up another tap room as well. And then we also still attract national brands. BrewDog is opening up a pub here later this year too. So you see kind of like a yes and no again.
Mm-hmm. So there's still some development happening. There's still some exciting new openings happening. We also talked a little bit about some legislative moves last year, and one thing that happened since we last talked was that wine can now be sold in grocery stores. Has that had any impact at all on beer or on shelf sets at all?
Shelf sets, so far, no. I would say yes on more floor displays, but no on actual cold shelf sets. Shelf sets, just like anywhere around the country, they are being diminished or changed due to beyond beer products. So that would include, your hop waters, seltzers, et cetera, things like that. But the biggest change due to wine and grocery is that our small and independent retail liquor stores are really struggling. And what that means for our smaller breweries that can't get into grocery is that they are also selling less beer. And even those that are selling in retail liquor stores are selling less beer there. So it is shifting consumers' buying habits, and it does have an impact on beer being sold through grocery or retail liquor stores, unfortunately.
So important to know that, even when things are going on outside of just beer itself, it could still have some impact on the segment. Another thing that's happening that we very briefly touched on last year was that the Colorado Department of Revenue's liquor code review is coming up. It's due in December. That's kind of a big overview of everything that's happening in BevAlc in Colorado. Do you have any expectations of what's going to come out of that or anything people should be aware of?
Yeah, I could talk at length about this topic, but you guys would be bored to tears. But I know people in the audience have been part of this conversation. I've sat in hours and hours and hours of meetings. We are at a point where that review and that report is coming forward, and we expect to see a report that would instigate some legislation next year at the state level. And so a couple things that may impact brewers are changes to how retail liquor stores can do tastings. So it would expand the amount that they could do and the hours that they could do, as well as allow them to do paid educational classes using alcohol, which they can't currently do. And let me just make sure I don't forget all of these. The other items that we expect to see would be for the ability of manufacturing breweries in Colorado to be able to have a production facility off-site within 10 miles of the licensed facility without another license. And this is something that's allowed for wineries right now, and the TTB does allow it federally, so we're just trying to align with the federal there. Similarly, we're hoping to see that there would be the ability for manufacturing breweries to have multiple sales rooms under one license. Currently in Colorado, wine and spirits have that privilege and beer does not. So each brewery that you go to in Colorado has a separate and distinct license, unlike some other states. And then a couple other smaller items. Right now, you can't buy off-premise on Christmas Day. So you can go to your tap room and drink there, but you can't buy a six-pack to go, and all of our liquor stores are closed. The proposal is to allow for Christmas Day off-premise sales. So, an old one that's still on the books. And then finally, one of the most contentious things that we talked about as a group is direct-to-consumer shipping for beer. I'm sure that's something that all of you guys are aware of, how that may impact you. But currently in Colorado, only wine could do that. And there is a proposal potentially to allow for beer and spirits to also do that.
Is there anything that breweries need to do at all before this happens? Is it kind of just like a wait and see?
Currently a wait and see, but we will have some of our state legislators at GABF today and Saturday. So if you're a Colorado brewer and you see me walking around with people, come say hi. Tell them if any of these things you want changed, let them know, because they will be reading that report. And then we'll engage all of you next year during legislative session.
Exciting stuff. A lot going on in Colorado. And we're going to dive into it even more in our panel discussions, and we'll have a regional focus panel later today. Let's end this conversation, and everyone here, we're here because we're also supporting the Guild, but if there's other ways for people who want to support the Guild or support local craft beer, what's the best thing for them to do?
The number one way to support the Guild is support breweries. Make sure they thrive. Go to their tasting rooms, buy their beer. There's a lot of events this week. Check out those events. We currently have a State of Craft Beer tap takeover at Oscar Blues Grill downtown. That's walking distance from the convention center. There's about 30 plus Colorado craft beers on draft there. So go grab one of those when you have a break. And then finally, come say hi to us at our United by Beer booth with 10 other state guilds there.
There's a lot going on. So everyone, go follow all of that. Support Colorado craft, support the Guild. Everyone, big round of applause for Shawnee. Thank you again for joining us on stage.
Thank you, Zoe. It's always fun to be here.
Yeah. And we're going to jump into our first panel talking about National Draft.
What's up, everyone? How you all doing? I know it's early. It's very early. So glad to see you all. Thanks for all coming out to Brew Talks. Thanks for supporting the Guild with us. We really appreciate it. And thanks to Dogfish Head for presenting this talk. So let's get into some draft beer talk. And I see a lot of cans and hands out there, but you can get a draft pour with one of your free tickets. So if you're into some 60-minute, pick one up. So, man, you should hire me to, do pitches.
On-prem specialist.
So we've heard for years that brands are built in the on-premise. So what happens when the on-premise is struggling? Draft is struggling. So draft has historically been an important piece of the business for craft brewers. It accounts for about 30% of distributed draft. It serves as a brand-building theater, or it has in the past. But draft has been on a slide since the mid-2010s, and it's not returned to pre-pandemic levels. That's from Brewers Association Chief Economist Bart Watson. Watson has estimated that 2023 distributed draft volume is 2 million barrels below historic trends. So through the halfway point of 2023, distributed draft volumes are down around 30% year over year. It's stalled at about the same place that it was in 2021. I'm not trying to depress you people, I'm sorry, but that's the state of the situation. We can all point to a variety of reasons for why this is happening. Consumers are going out less, they're ordering other things, they're ordering seltzers, spirits, wine, FMBs. They're not drinking at all, some of them, or they're drinking non-alcoholic products. Cans have become a much bigger part of the industry. Just look around here. I mean, we're serving cans too at this event. That's just the state of the situation right now. And the number of beer drinking accounts that have permanently closed is pretty high coming out of the pandemic. And finally, consumers are getting priced out. So let's talk about what's going on with draft and hit on some strategies for maybe turning it around that are, more than a. So joining me on stage right now is Dogfish Head co-founder Sam Calagione. Thanks for being here, Sam.
Thank you, Justin. Psyched to be here with you guys.
We also have Buffalo Wild Wings Director of Beverage Strategy and Innovation, Jason Murphy. Thanks for being here, Jason.
Appreciate that uplifting intro.
I have to turn it on. And Tamarron Consulting co-founder and president, Lori Scheffler. Thanks for being here, Lori.
Thank you for having me.
So before we get rolling here, we have a text line. If you have questions, text them to me at 617-336-8560. I'll try to get you some answers. We'll start with you, Jason. What does draft mean to Buffalo Wild Wings business? Why is it so core to your business model?
I mean, it's everything for us. We're a huge draft place. We're a sports bar, right? So inherently it makes sense that we're going to pour a lot of draft beer. But it's in our DNA. We really pride ourselves in pouring a good draft beer for every guest that comes in. If you look at our beer sales, 93% of our beer mix is draft. 7% of that is package, and half of that 7% comes from one brand. So we rely on draft in everything that we do. And if draft beer fails, then our BevAlc program is a total fails.
How often are you tapping a new keg?
Oh, I had this stat. I think it's something like every 30 seconds we tap a new keg.
I think it was 32, but
you're close.
Thank
you. Thank you for fact checking me. I appreciate it. Yeah.
So, Sam, how big of a piece of the business is draft for Dogfish, and how big is it for Boston Beer? And how have you adjusted your mix as it's become more challenging?
Yeah, so before I answer, I just want to make sure I get my thank yous in. So, we've been proud to be doing this with you guys for a number of years now and always look forward to learning from each other. I do want to thank all of our coworkers, especially Matt, who put a lot of hours into setting this up with Team Brewbound and with Cervantes Masterpiece. I also want to, take a moment to say I'm proudly double fisting right now because my buddy Dave from Ska's in the house, and he's class of 95 as well. We've been doing this over half our lives. Dave, where are you, buddy? I'm proud of you, wherever you are, brother. Excited to hear your guys' panel. So for us, our drop was not that dramatic. Like I looked at it before this, and 10, 15 years ago, we were about 25% draft as brand Dogfish, and now we're about 20% draft, 23% on-prem Dogfish business, of which that 23%, 20 is draft. And that's, I think, because we kind of came up as a brand that focused on higher ABV beers, even in the era of, 750 mils, bigger packages that were more wine-like in their presentation. So as a mix, we didn't feel it as much. But, as you referenced, Bart's stat, this is not a pandemic problem, it's a generational problem. We're now in almost a decade of the declines for beer. So, we have felt that a little bit. And honestly, for us, we'll talk a little bit about ways that we're trying to reinvigorate excitement into our draft offerings with the success of Citrus Squall. I also think, we got some great craft distributors in the building today. Shouts to Terry. We're going to hear from one of her coworkers on the next panel. But I think overall, and this isn't like saying there aren't other things our distributor partners have been amazing at, particularly during COVID, but I do think while the draft challenge has not been COVID related, it's more generational. I do think when the world had to shift to a focus on off-prem, our distributors were there for that moment beautifully and helped to get the drinks to the consumers. But I feel like there's been a little bit more of a hole for bringing the resources back from the average distributor to the focus on-prem post-pandemic. That is something that I think would really help move the needle. And then I'd say for our Sam brand, it's even a higher ratio of draft than Dogfish, and particularly not our core lager. We basically chose to focus on our seasonal program and keeping a dynamic line with one handle, and that we mix really well. I know, Jason, you guys are doing an awesome job with Oktoberfest. So overall, down for both brands a little bit, but excited about the moment we have in front of us.
So, Lori, Sam referenced that big shift in prioritization for wholesalers to package during the pandemic, which is obvious. But what's the mindset you're hearing now from distributors on prioritization of package versus draft?
I wanted to just first start with kind of setting the context a little bit. So when we first had this discussion, I reached out to the NBWA because I work with them a lot, and we'll talk about a lot of the tools that they're developing, not only for distributors, but also for every industry member. And their economist is Lester Jones. I'm sure many of you have heard of Lester, and he's equally as awesome as Bart is. So I certainly don't want to be up here and try to pretend like I'm as knowledgeable as they are, because I certainly am not. But one of the things that Lester sent me was a spreadsheet, and I'm going to kind of be looking over at it as I talk about it. But and this is all like January through June this year. And what he talked about is that the total industry is down by 5%. So draft has come back to be 9% of that industry volume, where it used to be about 10% pre-pandemic. But when you think about what that means, so you've got even cans are down, bottles are down, draft is down, but the size of the pie is so much smaller. So that just makes it such that everybody, every package is struggling. And I think that really shows that it's more of a systemic issue as opposed to any one specific tier. And we see that a lot of venues have shifted to that large format can, which is a loss of a lot of draft opportunities. And so while we work through that supply chain, all of the cans that are still in the industry and the pricing that goes along with it, I think you'll see some shifts going back and forth. But at this point, the distributors are prioritizing draft to the extent that their suppliers are asking them to do that, from what I've been told.
Jason, what are you hearing about wholesaler level of engagement from your operators?
I think we have seen a little bit of a dip in engagement from a lot of our wholesalers. A lot of the prioritization is still going to off-prem, specifically C-store. C-store seems to be the priority from all of the conversations we have, and we know the reasons why. The 19.2 format is just blowing trends out of the water. That's where the consumer is going. But we're not seeing the same level of engagement that we used to pre-pandemic with the support that we would like to see, folks coming in doing samplings or pint nights or things like that. We're just not getting the same level of support that we had been in the past.
So sticking with you for a second, what's the appetite then like for package placement in your accounts, as draft sort of struggles?
Yeah, I mean, I think I set this tone earlier. Like, we're a draft house and we always want to be a draft house. So package is going to play a role for us in certain spots, but we have 30 tap handles. I pride myself in the fact that we can offer a wide variety of styles of ABVs, of different breweries and brands, of different locales for what we say every guest for every occasion. And I can do that with 30 draft handles. What I use my package cooler for is to maybe pulse in some things that haven't really earned their way to a draft spot yet. But everything in the package cooler is like trying to figure out, can this earn its way up to a draft spot? Draft is always going to be the most important part of our business for us. We really pride ourselves on making sure that our servers and bartenders know how to pour a good quality draft beer, and I don't think we'd want to do it any other way other than that.
I got a question there. Of the different beer categories you guys sell, does craft do better on draft than in cans compared to, say, light domestic or Mexican?
You didn't prep me for this question, Sam. I don't know. If I was to be honest, I would say craft probably does a little bit worse in package. I think craft does better for us on draft. We have a great prominent section of great craft brands on draft. My opinion of craft on draft is that if you can't find what you're looking for with one of our 30 handles, like, you probably didn't want to drink a beer anyway. But to the point of what we use package for, it's to add incrementality to our program for something that we probably wouldn't put on draft. And that's talking like, we're probably not going to, at a Buffalo Wild Wings, we're not going to put a 14% ABV, triple IPA on draft. But there's the guest who wants that. That's a package placement. So we really want to focus on what we can move the most velocity on with the things on draft. And you can probably find that in all of our craft brands. So.
Sam, it seems you have a success story, though, that is both in draft and in a 19.2-ounce single-serve can. Can you talk a little bit about the strategy behind Citrus Squall and how that's sort of, ridden both of those rails?
Yeah, so I mean, we started brewing that maybe 3 or 4 years ago as Tupelia. We wanted to phonetically suggest it was a cocktail, and we opened our brewery 28 years ago, our distillery 21 years ago. So we've been playing around with different fermentable sugars to make bases to distill, including agave, for almost that long. And as we were kind of coming out of the pandemic, and we know that the draft sales shrinking were pre-pandemic, but were definitely accelerated by the pandemic. But what that kind of crossed also the line of a lot of these younger drinkers moving out of beer towards seltzers and towards cocktails, both full-proof cocktails with the rise of tequila and canned cocktails. So all right, well, that's in our wheelhouse too. What can we do beer-wise that could be a draft focus that's intentionally more of a Trojan horse, basically saying the average 21 to 31-year-old that walks in a bar, they're likely going to gravitate towards a seltzer or a cocktail first. What can we do to turn them on to craft beer for the first time by making that beer have a lot of the cocktail DNA in it? So for us, Citrus Squall is primarily fermented from sugars from barley, but double-digit fermentation sugars come from both agave and grapefruit juice. So it has real like Paloma vibes and DNA. It splits the difference in ABV, kind of between a traditional cocktail and a beer at 8. And we intentionally line priced it with our core beers to try and make it an attractive offering, profitable offering for our partners. And we talked about, should it have a special garnish, should it have a cocktail-centric glass, but we're like, our partners right now don't want another glass. They don't want another giant grapefruit in their stall of fruit for garnishes. But we did say, let's go for it, make a really distinct standout tap handle, bright fluorescent pink, and spent extra money on that, and it really has kind of paid dividends. And so yeah, with Citrus Squall, it's our fastest growing release that we've done as a core beer in the last 5 years.
So we're getting a few questions into the text line, 617-336-8560. Jason, following up on the distributor engagement question, how is the engagement post-COVID from suppliers?
I think we've seen the same level of engagement, same level of interest. I think the area where we would like to see some improvement, and we talked about this a little bit on our pre-call, but we seem to have lost a bit of the fun in the on-premise. And it feels to me like a lot of those fun, engaging events has started to move to own-premise, which is great. And I think everyone who is operating out of their own tap room should make sure they have those events that are driving consumers into their own tap rooms. But it seems to have been at the expense of the on-premise, and maybe this is an unpopular opinion. But I don't know the last time. Do people care about firkins anymore? Someone told me they didn't. But I don't know the last time I saw a firkin tapping at a tap room or a bar. I mean, I would love to see some of that kind of stuff come back. I used to feel like you'd go out to sports bars and you'd see trivia nights hosted by a Dogfish Head or football bingo hosted by Creature Comforts, things like that. That kind of stuff I don't feel like has come back. Since pre-COVID, I feel like a lot of that stuff has moved to on-premise, and I think for on-premise for bars, sports bars, restaurants, tap rooms, to start to claw some of that draft business back, we have to make the on-premise fun again. And I think it's lost a little bit of that in the last few years.
Do you feel, go ahead, Lori.
Oh, I was just going to say that when we get to it, some of the on-premise activation kits that we've been working with Boston Beer and the NBWA, they're designed to be exactly that. So it's designed to be, music is better with beer, and how can you make music fun? And games are better with beer, so if you're having a trivia night, how can you incorporate beer? So we've got some tools that we think would be really helpful, and they're available to everyone in the industry. So we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and you can see some of the point of sale items out there. There are table tents, there are signs. I think you got a table over there. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But one thing I wanted to ask you, Lori, is month over month, we keep seeing the consumer price index for beer uptick for out-of-home pricing as far as that goes. How much of that is a factor going on with what we're seeing in the on-premise with draft? Are consumers being priced out?
So I can't speak to that certainly as well as somebody like Lester can. I know that we have worked over the years with John Lane from Winking Lizard, and some of you may know John. He's has a chain of restaurants in Ohio. He's very passionate about draft beer, very passionate about quality of draft beer. And he did express that concern to me about 6 months ago that, he's looking at the price of draft and it's making it almost harder for him to sell draft versus the price of package. And that was a real concern to him because he feels that, as many of us do, that draft is beer's big advantage. It's something that wine and spirits don't have, and the presentation of draft and the quality of draft. So I do know that there are concerns about that. I can't speak fully on the price index.
I was obviously going to ask you, so go for it.
I mean, it's an issue. It's something we're paying a lot of attention to. There's a major craft brand who, in my head, over the last 5-6 years, maybe even longer, their half barrel was always around kind of that $140, $150 price. And I got a note back from our supply chain team the other day saying that we're paying an average of $180 for that same half barrel that we were buying what felt like for just a couple of years ago, $140. And we've got to figure out, can we take price and pass that on to the consumer, or are we going to take a hit to our profits? And neither are a good solution. The pricing seems like it's gone up pretty out of control in the last couple of years, and we've got to figure out what we can do to make that back for the consumer. And then something that is very concerning that we're keeping a very close eye on is student loan repayments restarting next month. And we're very concerned on what's going to happen to what choices the consumers have to make. Because an establishment like mine, where the main occasion drivers are sports and wings, we need to turn beer into a third main occasion driver. But right now, sports and wings, they're going to come in for sports. That you don't have to pay for that. You're going to get your wings. What you might sacrifice on is you were going to have 2 60 minutes and now you had one, or you were going to have a 60-minute and now you've traded to whatever we have on special for $4. So that's something that is really concerning me, that we'll see what happens in the next few months.
Do you have a beers per check stat that you can share?
Yeah, I haven't updated it in the last couple months, but tracking since 2019, similar to kind of Lester's overview of on-premise being in decline over the last decade, our drinks per check overall are down since 2019. Down fairly consistently across the board for every kind of beer style that we have, across craft, domestic, and import. But even though average beers per check are down, our drinks per check for beer are down lower than anything else that we have. So spirits is maintained a little bit, wine is maintained a little bit, but beer we're seeing going lower. I will say the one bright side to that is if you look at units per 100 checks, we're down a significant percentage across all categories. If you look at sales per 100 checks, we're up quite a bit. And so, and we're up more than the price that we've took over that same time period. So what that tells me is even though consumers are drinking less, when they come into our bars, they're trading up and they're drinking better. So we were getting 2.5 drinks per check, now we're getting 2, but that guest is spending more on the beers that they are getting when they come in.
Sam, how do you see craft brewers sort of playing the balancing act in this moment when pricing is what it is, the inflationary environment is what it is, but craft has been a premium item. So how do craft brewers sort of strike that balance?
I think at this moment it's a different story for the taproom brewery that's going direct to consumer, and I think that's one of the great gems of the trajectory of draft. Is I think they've definitely done a great job in general of appealing to a younger drinker, and it's a little scary, frankly. I think that it's kind of a tale of two cities where it's like, the 4-pack direct to consumer from the brewery is something that you see more in younger drinkers, like social feeds, more so than the 12-pack at a big chain store that they bought. And the other thing that I think we haven't talked too much about, I think you did on the pricing thing, which is, venue sales count as on-prem sales for us. And I do think this is one place where legal marijuana has had a really big impact, because I do think, it was funny, 3 nights ago, I was with Rob Todd in Maine, and I traded him a 4-pack of Alley Ave Stout for a 55-gallon or 55-pound bag of organic barley. I got fucking ripped off in that deal.
That's not the type of bag I thought you were going to say that you were getting.
Behind the dumpster in Portland, Maine. And he was saying, shit, I can't take up price fast enough. I'm a draft-oriented brewery. I can't take price up fast enough to keep up with my increase in costs. And then last night I was with John Lane at an event in Ohio, and he was saying brewers are on a precipice where they're pricing themselves out of relevance. So you can see the tension is really there for smaller producers and the entrepreneurs, on premise. So I want to make that point, but I forget what your question was.
I forgot too at this point.
We nailed it, Justin.
Yeah, let's just say that. Somebody is asking something that, you and
Can I finish up on that one? So we have an example in our home state, which was kind of the Bonnaroo of the Mid-Atlantic, called Firefly Festival. And in essence, when 19.2s and 24s go up to $18, $22, definitely the supplier's not getting the gain of that exorbitant pricing. And I don't know, like here at Red Rocks, what that looks like for craft breweries or the other great venues, but it definitely does accelerate that choice to maybe have an edible and one drink instead of enjoy a whole night of drinking. And we got to figure that out with the younger consumer, not just the younger drinker, the consumers of good times.
Well, to that point, it might have been in your publication that I read it in, but there was a study that came out recently talking about Gen Z drinkers. And of LDA Gen Z drinkers, 34% of them say they don't drink alcohol of any kind. And of that, what they're turning to are edibles to marijuana. And so that is a huge percentage of an upcoming generation that, as of now, we just don't have access to.
You just can't wait to get edibles into Buffalo Wild Wings, right?
Boneless and on the wing.
It's the next LTO sauce.
So you mentioned bringing fun back, and the things that were fun when some of us were coming up in craft in the mid 2010s probably aren't appealing to consumers today. Like when was the last beer? Are beer dinners still a thing that are driving some traffic? Or tap takeovers, or release theme nights? The Meet the Brewer events. I mean, I feel like we may be past that, but is that something that, needs revisiting? Can it appeal to a younger consumer? Or we just,
Well, I'm looking forward. Lori's been an awesome catalyst at bringing together different groups that care about bringing draft back from Stainless Keg Association, MBWA, BI, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you say about that, because creative ways to engage with the younger customers is something that you're thinking about every day. But yeah, for us, let's face it, the average consumer that's coming into beverage now grew up with 60-minute Sam Adams, Sierra Pale Ale in their parents' fridge to steal, and you don't necessarily want to drink what your parents drink, and that's a reality. And show up at a beer 6-hour beer dinner to meet some guy who started a brewery 30 years ago. It's just like, who gives a fuck? 10,000 people started a brewery, you know? I don't need to meet the person. Everybody starts a brewery, right? So that might have mattered a lot, meeting the founder, you know, but to Jason's point, come up with creative ways to make it about your brand, but not necessarily try to engage with someone who'd rather be on TikTok for 1 minute for 4-course beer dinner. Do something experiential, engaging. You know, last night Megan and Devin and I did a really fun event at our Cincy tap room all about sustainability and talking about the different, whether it's regenerative grains, organic, unmalted barley, skipping the step of a malting house, and talking with people that don't just care about beer, but care about, you know, climate change. John Lane mentioned that one of his most successful nights in the last 5 years was an old school vertical tasting of Three Floyds, you know, Dark Lord. You know, Nick Floyd wasn't in the room, but he made sure that they got that at every one of their accounts and could execute, you know, excitement for it on social, which drew a younger drinker. So I think you can get more creative and more experiential, but you should not give up on making something special come to life on-prem. We need it now more than ever.
Lori, can you talk a little bit more about that, about making things an occasion or special? Because you've been working with the NBWA on the Beer First Fridays agenda, which it doesn't have to be a Friday, but, you know, can you talk a little bit about that and, you know, maybe some success stories that have come out of that, the lift that accounts have seen from doing that?
Yeah, for sure. So we started the Beer First umbrella, and first let me explain what that means. It means that we're trying to sell the category of beer first. So it's always starting with, you know, what does beer mean to this account? How does beer deliver profitability and bring traffic into the account? And then we can segue into, you know, this is the brand, this is the beer that I'm representing today, but we want to always prop up the category first. So that's what Beer First means. We decided to start these on-premise activation nights, and one of the distributors coined them Beer First Fridays. And we always say, it doesn't have to be a Friday. It doesn't have to be the first Friday of the month. It can be any day of the week. But what it's designed to do is just bring some more fun back into the account. So we started with, last year, we decided, let's do some kits. Like, let's just make it really easy for people to implement these programs. And it doesn't have to be a distributor. And it's better if it's a distributor and a supplier, a brewer partnering together to really sponsor their brands. So we have a series that we call Better with Beer. So we started with, I believe we started with Music is Better with Beer. So if you're in an account that is like this one that features music or has music trivia nights or, you know, a DJ or a band one night of the week, there's some tools that just make it fun to, you know, be part of that. So we've got, for Music is Better with Beer, we've got some napkins that can also be just printed out on a piece of paper that are Mad Libs. You get to write your own song, and it mentions beer in it. So you can mention your beer style or your beer brand, and you come up with a song. So that's kind of fun. I think there's a country, there's a blues song, and a rap song that you can write. So you could make that into a contest if you wanted, but just kind of fun. And then there's others that are just kind of table tents that say, hey, what brand do you pair with a certain song? So I'm going to put Sam on the spot here because we're up here drinking some Dogfish beers. What would you pair? Pick one of your brands and a song to pair it with.
So we got 60 Minute on tap. So I would do a ridiculously long. So I do Built to Spill does a cover of Neil Young's a Pocahontas song. So I would do that because it goes on for almost 60 minutes. So you could sip for 60 minutes while the song goes on.
And
I thought you were
going
to say the Painkillers.
The Pain Relievers.
Pain Relievers.
IP
Sorry, I thought I was close.
IP infringement.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't foist that on my worst enemy.
We won't make you rap.
All right. Well done, Sam. That's exactly how you'd pair a beer with a song. So I love that. And let's see, we have Games Are Better with Beer. So if you're having retro game night or trivia nights, we can have different ways to pair beers with that. And then the last one is Food is Better with Beer. And that's such an opportunity to really focus on how we can suggest more beer with food for accounts. And so we've got some ways to just have consumers vote on which beer went best with which foods, or having the wait staff be recommending beer with food, because one of the biggest ways that consumers decide what beer they're going to order is by wait staff recommendation. So really important to engage the wait staff when you're trying to make sure that consumers buy beer in an account. So one of the biggest success stories, I'm going to lean back on John Lane. We had a Beer First Friday at his account with Great Lakes Brewing Company in Cleveland. And by featuring, and one of the key learnings that John had was to make sure that you do choose specific brands to feature with your Beer First Friday. And by doing that and really focusing on a couple of the Great Lakes brands, he was able to see a 10% lift that night by doing a Beer First Friday. So they had a lot of giveaways. They gave away some koozies, and I'm trying to think what else. But he felt it was really successful in driving business for his account.
Jason, you recently put out a 2024 RFP to your partners. You've got a pretty specific message to them. What was that?
That beer is losing. At Buffalo Wild Wings, but in the on-premise. It's been losing for a while, and we've got to come up with some fun ways to bring that back. So interestingly enough, we just went out and did a big BevElk research study to understand kind of what consumers wanted out of the Buffalo Wild Wings beer program. I shouldn't say beer, out of our BevElk program. And I look over all of beverage now, not just beer anymore. So to be honest, like, I had a slight slant to like, okay, I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna do this study, and I'm gonna get some really great ideas for spirits and cocktails to come back on this. And we recruited 1,500 people. We did focus groups. We went out and dined with people, and the overwhelming response that we got was like, you guys are a beer place. You went on TV for 10 years, like saying Wings Beer Sports. Like, that's what I know you for. Yet we found out that people stopped coming to us because they don't think we have the beers that they want, and that's the beers that all of you in this room brew. They think that we have nothing but domestic light lagers and imports, and I don't want to talk badly about any of our domestic or import partners. They do great business for us, but there's this huge section of people who don't come to Buffalo Wild Wings because they don't think we have the craft beers we want. And I'll use one example. I was talking to this lady in California, and she said, God, I would like to go to Buffalo Wild Wings. You guys just don't have the selection of local crafts that we want. I'm like, well, that's interesting. Like, I built the menu in California. I know we've got a decent selection. So I poked her a little bit, and I said, like, what do you actually want? What does local mean to you? And she brings up, she's like, I just want beers from Modern Times or AleSmith or Firestone Walker, and she starts rattling off these breweries. I'm like going crazy out of my fucking mind because I've got all of those beers on tap. Like, what is she thinking about? And I show her the menu, and she's like, oh my God, like, you have these. Like, I'm gonna go into Buffalo Wild Wings tonight and I'm gonna get these beers. We've got this huge awareness problem, and I don't think it's an issue with us. I think it's an issue with a lot of casual dine, a lot of on-premise. And one thing we asked in the RFP is like, we need the help of our brewery partners to let people know, let your fans know that we've got your beer. And I'm going to single out the folks from Holidaily who are in the room. Holidaily's done a really great job at like going onto their socials and being like, hey, our beer's on at Buffalo Wild Wings. You want to go get great wings and our beer? Like, go check out a B-Dubs. But that happens with like 1 out of every 100 of our partners. Like, we've got to make that happen more often. Like, you've got to help your on-premise partners. Let people know you've got fans out there who want to go drink your beer when they go out. They just don't know where to go get it. And so on top of all of the Beer First Friday stuff that we should be participating in, and I think sports is better with beer too. We can have some fun toolkit stuff there. But I think there's a lot of things that we can do with our partners to really let people know, like, we've got let the consumers know we've got your beer on tap. And like, Buffalo Wild Wings is a cool place to come drink a craft beer too.
You know, I should say that we have tons of social assets as well on the portal. So use those to advertise all of that. And this year it was awesome because the BA allowed us to access all of their library of images. So we're able to really, in my mind, upgrade substantially with what those social assets look like, because they're true photos, and the beer looks really good, and so it's portrayed the way it should be. So use those to advertise. I mean, that's just an easy download for you. And there's a sheet in the back that will tell you how to access all of that, so please use them.
Can I add one last thing?
Absolutely.
I'll be quick.
Hey, nobody's here to hear me talk. They're here to hear from you guys.
I would like to see some interesting product innovation too, and I'm hearing that from a few other folks. I don't need another hazy IPA. I know that's what drives a lot of the traffic in the own premise, but I need 2, maybe 3 hazy IPAs. What I think is really interesting are the breweries who are doing really great innovation with flavors. I see Justin from Station 26 in the room. That tangerine cream, like, that's an awesome beer, and that showcases like flavors that people are going for. And honestly, it's the flavors that people got out of White Claw and High Noon and Truly that, as they start to come back into beer, that's the flavors that they want into beer. There's a mix pack that you guys are doing with the Sam brand, right? What's the name on that one? We're bringing back? Yeah, no, the Epic Squeeze. The Epic Squeeze.
Yeah,
The Epic
a lot of
Squeeze
flavors.
is this great Sam Adams mix pack that is just full of flavor, and you're like, holy cow, I wouldn't expect this in a beer. And that's where consumers are going with spirits and cocktails, or things that are really full, punch you in the mouth flavor. And I would like to see a little bit more of that come from beer.
So I've got one more question, and I've got a ton of questions here that I'll do like lightning round at the end. But what is the risk of inaction? Because Bart Watson, and I referenced him at the top, put it out there that this is really sort of an existential crisis potentially, because if bars and restaurants don't invest in draft systems, then it becomes a much larger problem. And you mentioned that it was a generational issue that we're seeing here. So I want to hear from each of you as far as if Team Beer isn't able to sort of turn the tide on draft, what are the risks here?
So yeah, I think it's a critical moment. You know, Shawnee mentioned the great work that the Guild's doing here in this state for sampling opportunities, and that's, you know, for 1 or 2 hours at an off-premise opportunity is, I think, what that change, evolution, and legislation would mean. But every day, every minute that a restaurant is open is an affordable sampling opportunity to try a new craft beer by the pint before you commit to buying it off-premise for a 6-pack or a case. And I really feel like this inflection point is very similar to the one, you know, 15, I don't know how many years ago, when liquor brands were allowed to advertise again, like on TV and magazines, et cetera. I feel like it caught the beer industry, you know, on the heel of our feet. Like, oh, we're already gaining, you know, we're already bigger than them, they're not going to gain share on us. And they did a great job of marketing to younger consumers. And I feel like the moment coming out of COVID was the right moment for us as an industry of beer people to say, oh my gosh, our occasion is back, getting people out in bars, enjoying pints together. And I feel like we're a little late to come together collectively as the restaurateurs, the distributors, and the brewers to right that ship and get the trajectory back. But I don't think the train's left the station. I think, you know, in the next year or two, we got to really focus on it. The last thing I'll say about that is the BA is in an interesting position for this, because the vast majority of our members and the vast majority of the 10,000 indie craft breweries in America don't need to, frankly, worry about the 3-tier system, and is beer gaining share in that, as long as they're growing revenue, profits, jobs, great things in their local community at their own local store. So, you know, honestly, this is an issue that affects our whole industry, but right now it's being felt more by the distributing breweries, I feel, than the taproom-oriented breweries.
Yeah, I mean, I brought up earlier asking brewery partners for help, you know, getting the message out that your beer's on tap at our place. We're going to do a better job of that too. So to Sam's point, you know, the next year or two is going to be, how do we let people know that we're Wings Beer Sports doesn't mean Wings Domestic Beer Sports. We're Wings All Beer Sports. But there's going to be an inflection point soon where those handles are going to go to wine. They're going to go to batched cocktails. Like, I might put on a nitro cold brew line. And I used to be a place that had 20 handles available to our brewery partners in each restaurant. Now I have 10. 30 handles. Now we have 20 because the other 10 are going to RTDs and things like that. So it's a decision something we're already talking about and a decision we're going to have to make soon.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned, I think draft is such a point of difference for beer, and it's something that we should celebrate. And it's better if we band together as an industry to address some of the challenges than if we kind of divide and think that each tier can do it on their own. It's just important to work together instead of against one another. So I think the opportunities here, we definitely want to drive the beer category and to drive draft beer because it showcases what is so great about beer.
So I'll go lightning round. We got to go through these pretty quick. We got a couple minutes, but have you considered whether service is a factor in some of the on-premise declines, Jason?
Absolutely. Yeah. Specifically for us, I go back to being known as a domestic place. Like our servers need to be doing a better job of saying, instead of saying, "Hey, this is what's on discount today," it's, "Hey, we just tapped this fresh keg of 60 Minute. It's so fresh, you got to try it." Like that's going to be a huge driver for us in 2024 in figuring out how to grow draft beer again.
How much of the price issue is being driven by suppliers versus distributors?
I think it's both.
Yeah, I'd say it's. I don't know. I'm not a distributor. I don't know, but I would say we know we're facing increased prices to a degree that's made it challenging for us to hold price.
And you mentioned social is one way people can support. Are there other ways that are sort of in your mind that you can get direct support?
Social, email, anything that's coming out from your channels to talk to your fans. Like I said, we're going to try to do the same. I've already brought it up. Would love to start talking about sports bar toolkits. Let's do pigskin bingo on Monday Night Football. Let's do live trivia. Let's bring that stuff back. Shit, let's do karaoke at Buffalo Wild Wings. I do it.
We got the screens.
Yeah, that'll be great.
All right, well, give it up for Lori, Jason, and Sam. Thanks to them. Please stick around. Zoe will be back up here with Ska, Holidaily, and Elite Brands. We'll take a 20-minute networking break. Let's get some beers, get some draft beer.
Thanks, Justin.
Thank you.
everybody. Welcome back. Exciting stuff. Everyone take your seats. Make sure you have your beer refills for our final discussion. Really our final Brew Talks discussion of 2023. It's a big deal. Yeah, no pressure, everybody. We heard this great conversation talking about kind of national trends in draft, what's going on there. But we really wanted to focus in on a regional level and take advantage of being in Colorado, which you have such a great craft beer market here. Some of the trends happening in Colorado can really inform what might be happening or might happen in the future for the craft scene. And so we wanted to talk about them and dive into that more focused level. So joining me today, I have these three lovely panelists here. Who have some great insights for all of you. I would recommend maybe taking out a notepad and some paper because they're going to have some information. Our male representative, I guess I just realized on this stage, Dave Thibodeau, co-founder and president of Ska Brewing. Welcome, Dave. Thanks for being here. And right next to Dave, we have Karen Hurt, who is the founder of Holidaily Brewing. Welcome, Karen. And right next to me, we have Katie Neerling, who's an account manager for Elite Brands of Colorado. Welcome, Katie. So really representing, we got breweries going on, we got wholesalers going on, got a lot of fun information. If you have any questions for them, I'm gonna plug that text line again. It's 617-336-8560. Ask away. I'll say that again a little later on in case you forget. But this kind of start off here, focus in, what even does draft look like in Colorado? Dave, I want to start with you. Ska's been around for a while now, so I'm sure you've seen some trends happen.
Class of 95!
That was a year before I was born. No shade, no shade. But I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes happen over the years, Dave. So what does the draft beer scene look like in Colorado now? How is it different right now?
Oh, I hate to keep beating this horse because I wish it were just truly dead, but the pandemic changed a lot for us, and I think probably two key things as far as draft goes. So talking about the on-prem, I think a big thing in Colorado, and we're a mountain brewery, and we're strongest in the mountain towns of Colorado. It's true, I think, also in the Front Range and in Denver and Boulder as well. But I think a lot of what has happened since the pandemic are things like staffing issues, where bars and restaurants and those in the hospitality industry are having a hard time staffing up and actually getting back open to the point where they were pre-pandemic. So, for example, like in Durango, or I spend a lot of time in Crested Butte, smaller mountain towns, but fair amount of volume for us. A lot of those restaurants, and our Colorado sales manager, Scott, is here too, and he lives in Summit County. But up there, it's the same deal. A lot of restaurants that were open 7 days a week are now open 5 days a week. And if you think about that, that's about, 28, 29% increase in days open. So if other things being equal, you're going to sell 28, 29% less draft just because places aren't open on Sunday or Monday and Tuesday now in a lot of Colorado, specifically in the restaurant and bar world. And the other thing I think that is a big change from the last few years is consumer behavior. And I think in places like a place like, even like our tasting room, for example, which we used to sell about 75% draft, if we're talking specifically draft, 75% draft versus 25% food in our tasting room. And then once the pandemic started, everyone had to sit at the table. The tables had to be 6 feet apart. All that cornhole playing and just mingling around the bar went away. And it still hasn't really come back. So we're now over 50% food, just under 50% draft beer, and we've seen that happen at a lot of our bars and kind of the bar restaurant world, where it's not so much just a restaurant space, but a space where there's more going on, sports bars, things like that. And I think a lot of the people that go there, you know, they're waiting to sit at a table. They're planning on eating food, whereas before they were just whoa, okay, 2 or 3 beers. Yeah. You know, so I think those are a couple of the big changes that have really affected us. Unfortunately, it's for the worse, but those are challenges that I think a lot of Colorado and being a tourist economy, especially in the mountain towns, that's what saves us in times like the summer and the winters. You know, we do get a lot of tourists, but as far as locals go, when they come out, they're going to sit at a table and they're going to eat food, and they're not going to just stand around, drink beer, or play games, drink beer, or mingle around the entire pub like they used to.
Karen, what does draft look like for Holidaily, and what are you seeing in that environment?
Yeah, so for anybody that doesn't know of Holidaily, we are from Golden, Colorado, and we produce entirely gluten-free beer. And we have 2 tap rooms here one in Golden and one in the Denver Tech Center. And then we distribute to 7 states in the southwestern U.S. And really, we started out with not a lot of draft in our company. We really were focused on package initially. But we've had a really big draft push lately. One of the highlights where we push draft is in breweries. So we're in about 80 different tap rooms in the Front Range of Denver because they want to have a gluten-free beer option, and they don't want to deal with having to brew a gluten-free beer. So we get to do that for them, and then they have a gluten-free option for their gluten-free guests, which is awesome and a great niche for us. So a lot of our draft is through that. But in addition, we have been pushing draft a lot this year in bars and tap rooms. One thing that we have to think of that other breweries don't worry about as much, although I know breweries do, is tap lines, because we cannot be hooked up to a tap line that had a regular beer on it. So let's say a tap line has Fat Tire on it, and then they hook up our Fat Randy's IPA. People can get sick from those beers. So we really have to be careful with the accounts. We go in and train them, and that's why we feel really comfortable with breweries, because we know they're cleaning their tap lines and taking care of them, and a lot of our draft is on there. But we're starting to expand our draft program really throughout the state of Colorado, and then we're hoping to continue expanding it into other states as we get more comfortable with how do we train these staffs and make sure that consumers can be entirely safe. And they've had some practice with ciders over the past 10 years, knowing that this is a dedicated line. So we feel like there's some good opportunity for us to go in and get some gluten-free, world-class beer on these lines.
Great. Katie, you bring the wholesaler perspective in here. What are you hearing at Elite Brands about what is being prioritized and what draft looks like right now in Colorado?
I think for us and for any wholesaler, it's incumbent upon us to add a value statement behind any draft keg we're selling. I like to preach that there should be an and statement behind everything that we as a sales team are projecting in the marketplace. We can tell you the story of the brewery, we can tell you the story of the brand, and then also how we as a distributor, wholesaler partner are going to support that account. Whether it is setting up activations like the First Beer Friday, or if we are doing staff trainings, or if we are being conscious of the price and walking them through. I found a lot of retailers, we have to go back to old school. We have to teach them that you can make more money on a premium keg and walk them through the profit that they can make on that keg, but then also use the tools in your back pocket of kegs you may have in your portfolio that you can do some price programming on and go back and forth between the two. You really have to become a consultant in their business because people still buy from people. And we have to really work a little bit harder to earn that business, but let's earn it in the best possible way that gets our supplier partners a long-term handle versus a rotating handle, and that they trust us. Because my other big soapbox moment is we are in the alcohol business, but now I find that, we are in the information business because suppliers are facing supply chain issues still. Somebody may not get the cardboard for their 6-packs, or they may face cooperage issues, or a truck can break down. There's a lot of things still behind the scenes that are going on, and if we as wholesale partners can give that information to our partners, we can come up with a pivot point, and we can come up with a solution-oriented pitch to them so that we're saving that business, because somebody will swoop it in and take it if you are not providing a solution. So it's not just selling a keg anymore, it's the and statement and everything else that goes with it. So it's incumbent upon us to provide that education and those tools to our sales teams and to one another, and then rely on suppliers to help us out in those things too. If we do that, I do believe that we can prove there is business to be gained again in draft beer, and there are reasons to work with small and independent craft brewers again, because we will be that value add to your business. We will be the consultant partner. We will grow mutually together again.
I told you you'd have to take notes. This is important information we're getting up here. So many of the discussions that we have within the industry, that even us at Brewbound are reporting about all the time, has to do with the off-premise and with scan data, and not as much discussion about the on-premise. And we know that off-premise is struggling too, and we're trying to work to bring back beer there and craft there. I want to hear from you first, Dave. Is draft even really a priority? Like, how important is draft to Ska right now?
I like that question, and I like that we kind of touched on some of that on the panel earlier. It's for us. It's I think I'm sure most breweries think of themselves this way, but there's an experience and a lifestyle that goes along with your brand, and I think for us, the pub atmosphere and the social aspect to it, and the idea of being in a bar or a restaurant and sharing a beer with friends, to us, that's pretty crucial. It's kind of, I think when we look at like RTDs or anything beyond beer or even wine now on draft, to me it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't compute for me. And when I go to the bar or the restaurant, I want to be around people that I can socialize with. I love that beer can does present in a lot of different ways on draft, whether it's color, glassware, whatever it might be, and it's something to talk about, and I think that always will give us an advantage, and we heard that earlier when Lori was talking about Beer First Fridays and everything that goes along with that, and I think it's, for us, we're about 30% draft to 70% package, which I'd love to see that number change. I mean, it was a lot different many years ago for us. I still feel all right about it, but I love that aspect of being out in the social side to it, and not that, with cans and everything, whether you're on the river or doing whatever Colorado mountain thing you might be doing, cans are great. It's always a fantastic thing, but I love the going out part, and it's what I miss, and it's what we're slowly getting back to. But for us, it's we're putting more and more effort into it every day, and we talk about it more and more every day, and I think draft is crucial to our future success, and it's really where I want to focus moving forward. And Colorado's got its challenges with the landscape on the off-prem, and navigating that is difficult now, and it's not necessarily a good or a bad thing as far as grocery stores having wine or full-strength beer. We knew that was going to probably happen one day, and it's kind of working out, but the on-prem and the draft thing that's our game moving forward, and working with our partners on the retail side in those bars and restaurants is, I think, crucial for the future, and bringing back that business for them, and I think there's a few other things we could touch on about that as we go through this conversation, but, they're struggling as well, and whether it's cash flow or whether it's just business in general, beer's losing, like we heard. I think that's where our focus really needs to be. And we can't drop the ball on the off-prem, but I think we really need to be focusing on our retail partners that have that social side with a large group of people where we can really share that experience with friends.
Karen, you mentioned that Holidaily was focused more on package a lot at the beginning. why was it important for you to bring draft onto it and get a draft program?
Yeah, draft is really important to Holidaily and brands like Holidaily. I think primarily because we're a premium product. We sell in a 4-pack, 12 ounce, and it sells right around $12.99 to $13.99 on the shelf. And people are a little hesitant to spend that kind of money for a 4-pack, 12 ounce. So being able to buy a beer at a bar and confirm that there is really good gluten-free beer is really important to breweries like Holidaily. And I think too, Sam and Jason were talking about it earlier, but we have to fight for draft. And one of the biggest reasons we got to fight for this is because it's very important to small breweries and craft breweries, because really, back in the day, historically, draft was pushed in the beginning by Miller's, Coors, Anheuser-Busch's, because they realized that the bigger the package, the bigger the profit for those guys, right? So they were making more money on draft. So they led us all to believe, and Dave and I are like, we love beer on draft, that draft beer is where it's at. It's so good. And so they really put, marketing dollars into that and pushed for it almost as a team, even though they were competitors, so that we would all be drinking draft. And what it means also for the little guys is the same thing. It's a great, profitable product for us to provide to bars and restaurants. And I think the damage is that if draft goes away, a lot of breweries are not going to be able to keep up with the costs for cans and boxes that are short, or lids, or all the things that go into these packaged products. And so I think as a community, as a beer community, we've got to fight for draft, and we have to work with these retailers, work with our distributors, and make sure that we hold our draft lines.
Katie, what are you hearing from all of your various partners of what is draft being prioritized? Are you looking to try to grow that area, or is it just a lot of focus on what's happening in package?
No, I think the best thing that you can do is ask your retail partner what's important to them, right? I think a lot of people have lost the connection in COVID to spend time with your buyers, getting to know them, what's important to them, what they get excited about, but then also what their business is. Because I have a lot of conversations with buyers, like, it actually sometimes doesn't matter if you like this beer, do your consumers like this beer? Will they buy this beer? Can this help grow your business? Because I think pre-COVID, maybe we had the luxury of doing a lot of things that we loved. And I was a buyer once, and I bought beers that you couldn't catch me drinking because I just don't like high ABV barrel-aged stouts with 5 different adjuncts in them. That's not my flavor profile. But that doesn't matter. What matters is what grows your business, and what matters is what moves the needle. And honesty and transparency and good conversations with your buyers, which I think we got away from in COVID, need to happen again, so that you can figure out their needs, you can figure out their wants, and you can figure out where you fit in that space. And for a distributor too, a lot of Elite's business, it was driven and still is driven by craft beer. But in full disclosure, sometimes we go in and we're talking about wine first. But again, you can add value as a distributor by introducing them to beers that they may not know about, right? Like, what are you doing, and what are those conversations so that you are going into an account with multiple things to talk to them about? Because then you're just going to become a more trusted partner in their business. And they're going to seek out you when maybe somebody else runs out of a draft line or their truck can't deliver that day. Like, if you are their go-to person, then if you've established that trust in that relationship, then you can grow your business. My top accounts personally, I have beer, wine, NA, and spirits in those accounts, and that's been a personal goal of mine, to grow each one of those segments, because then you can do more with them, and you can build that programming, and you can come up with the cool beer activation ideas when they have that trust in you. So no, I think draft is still very important, and you just kind of have to spend the time with people, slow down, get to know them, get to know what drives their business, and get all the bartenders on your side, get the servers on your side. I'm a huge fan of, bringing coffee to somebody that, has had a bad day or had a rough week. I talk about it all the time in our staff meetings, like, is somebody having one account having an anniversary party? that you can buy pizza from another account? Like, how can you, how can you become integral into their business, because they will trust you and they'll give you more business in the long run. And just get back to that. The old school stuff still works.
Just one more thing on that. A challenge right now, I think post-COVID especially, is that buyers are rotating like as soon as you get a relationship, they're gone. And I don't know if it's just a post-COVID thing or whatever, right? But the importance, and you alluded to it or talked about it a little bit, is you have to get to know the whole staff. So we do tastings, right? We'll do them at Whole Foods or whatever. And yes, it's great that we're there and we're selling some beer to some customers. But I always say to our staff, like, know every staff member in there by the time you leave. Because even if that beer buyer leaves, a new one might come in and the whole staff will be like, oh yeah, you gotta keep supporting Holidaily, we love them, they're great. So whatever, you've got to, it's not just one person that you're spending your time with, because they're rotating too much right now. And then the other is that you have to go back. Like, you can't go see somebody once a year and think that's gonna be enough. So our sales staff is, they're continually going in and visiting accounts, because you don't know what buyer's gonna be there, and it's so frustrating. You get in, and you think you're good, and then they're gone. And so that seems to be at even a higher rate than pre-COVID. So we just have some strategies to try and hold those accounts, even if buyers are rotating, by knowing the staff and promoting our brand to everybody versus just that one person.
And if you have a proven track record of sales, right, your book of business has contributed to their success, they're not going to turn away from that. So if you have that data and that story to tell, and your suppliers to back you up as a wholesale partner, you can keep that business even with a rotating buyer.
I want to plug the text line again. It's 617-336-8560. And we have a question in there. Post-pandemic, what are you seeing in draft sales trends in your out-of-state markets? This is directed at Dave and Karen, or from your out-of-state suppliers to Katie.
Trends in out-of-state markets on draft?
Yeah.
The trend is not much for us. We're really struggling with draft out of state, and the couple things that do work, seasonals work, and I was gonna maybe touch on that in a little bit, but I think. That's something, an Oktoberfest is a good example, since that's the season right now. Pumpkin beers probably as well. Something where you have a unique story to tell, and there's a lot of on-prem accounts that take advantage of seasons, and I think it's a smart move for an off-prem or on-prem account. So I think seasonals are kind of for us in general, 37% of our beers on draft are seasonal, which is a huge number. Unfortunately, they don't all link together and hold that handle throughout the entire year. But I think that's the one place where we can see success. We can certainly sell in to any of our wholesalers, our Oktoberfest or our Mexican lager, to get through a season. But it's not a tap handle we can hold very well. We're definitely struggling in out-of-state markets with our other stuff. We have our biggest flagship, our Modus Operandi IPA is okay. There's some steadfast accounts, but getting new accounts with newer beers, very difficult for us. So it's hard for me to spot trends out of state. And we're only in about 10 other states, so it's kind of it's a difficult thing. But our volume's just not what it used to be in those states, unfortunately.
For us, we don't distribute much keg and draft beer out of state. One thing that we have to do is be careful of the keg. So other things that we have to think about, like we can't do MicroStar. So if we do have a draft state or a draft account, we send one-way kegs and they can recycle it once it gets there. We're not big enough to gather all the cooperage and get it back to us. So we do very little bit out of state. We're probably not good people to ask this question to, but that's okay. But what I do think, post-COVID especially, is there's just PTSD. I mean, in the retailers, in the distributors, and we talked about this on our call, but when COVID happened, there were hundreds of thousands of kegs in bars and restaurants that were not going to get drank. And the distributors were like, you pay for it, and the retailers were like, you pay for it. And it's almost like there's this fear a little bit that could happen again, or now they know, so like, let's be a little tempered on how much we buy or how much we distribute. And I do think like resources were cut on both sides, and we haven't quite caught up. I think optimistically, I believe everything's cyclical, and I think we're gonna come back to getting people back out there and getting them social again. But for Holidaily, just in terms of draft outside the state, we have a lot more safety beer-wise that we have to think about, and so we want to do it right when we go out of state with beer, with draft beer.
I think for us, we believe very strongly just integrity and quality of product and pitching that regardless if you're in state or out of state, right? Like, I believe in every brand that I sell, and I want to communicate that to anyone who will listen, and I am happy to have that discussion with folks because Colorado is very much founded on an extremely strong local business, and we love that, and we support that. But I always tell accounts that some of the reasons that these local breweries are in existence are because of people like Sam. And so we owe a debt of gratitude to a lot of out-of-state suppliers. And if the integrity and the quality of product is there, give it a shot. Prove me that it won't sell. And you have to kind of push sometimes and put the ownership back on them. But if you believe in what you're doing and you have the right suppliers, then the proof should be in that pudding.
Dave, you talked earlier about the experience of having a draft beer and how important that was and how we used to really focus on that, and it's kind of drifted away. Have you seen, do new consumers, do the younger consumers, do they care about that at all? Are they looking for that? For those younger ones maybe coming in and trying Ska on draft?
That's another good and difficult question. I think it's thinking about kind of, well, we all know that the Gen Z has a third of them aren't drinking alcohol at all. And if that's kind of who you're talking about, those people that are just of drinking age and maybe, in their early to mid-20s, we're definitely seeing across the board, and Durango's kind of like this little micro market of Colorado, but I feel like we're in a little bit of a bubble, but I feel like it gives us a kind of a parallel read on the rest of the state. And it's interesting because that is where, I was talking about how kind of unfortunate it is maybe that so much of our overall revenue is food now as far as that ratio of food to beer goes because the margins are so much lower. But at the same time, that's where we are seeing that younger generation come in. They're coming in to eat our food. And I think we're seeing that around town too. It's kind of the people that are drinking the beer that are younger, it's just doesn't seem to be the beer that's bringing them in to begin with. And I think that's probably something we should all be thinking about because, maybe it doesn't necessarily have to be food, but other things that can bring people in that can lead them to our beer, later in within that experience. And I think draft and on premise, and once they get there and they get that feel for it, if they can feel something else there, and it's once again, it's the things that we've been talking about that might be a little bit out of the ordinary and kind of starting to think out of the box again about maybe it's just not the beer dinner like it used to be. Maybe it is, something a little different like the Mad Libs or whatever it might be. And I think that's maybe how you can introduce people to that environment. And then maybe we'll see some success there. I certainly made a strong mental note of that earlier with the first panel, and I think moving forward, because that's the challenge we're all facing. I mean, things are challenging right now. I think there's things that will naturally get over through time, but when you're facing a generation where over a third of them aren't drinking alcohol at all, that's a really big challenge. And I think that experience is, that's a lot of what brought me into craft beer was friends and having that experience with them out in a social setting. And I think that's kind of where we need to focus as far as the trends I'm seeing, it's difficult, but I think it's the other things that are leading them in. At least what I'm seeing, in our neighborhood, it's other things that drive them there first. And I'll be honest, I am seeing repeat younger people, and it's good, and they're becoming part of the family. And I think that's the way forward.
Let's talk about the margins for a second here, because that's something we haven't really touched on too much, but that's a big part of draft, is that the margins are a lot better on draft than they are in off-premise. I want to hear from you, Karen, because you talked about this on our prep call, and I really enjoyed it. But are you having conversations about that with accounts? Are people talking about that in the industry at all?
Not as much as they should, right? And I think, we definitely are with our distributors. And Katie alluded to it earlier. Sometimes you have to do the math for people. They're very set on I'm going to make 20%, I'm going to make 20%. And I'm like, well, if you make 15, you actually are putting more dollars in your pocket than if you make 20 or whatever it might be, right? So we have to walk them through that math. We are a higher margin product, and so that's a battle we're up against all the time, even if it is a keg. So there's a lot of education that goes into these buyers, and I know they're being held, your bonus is held on your average is 30% or whatever it might be. But I'm like, well, you don't take 30% to the bank. You take the $20 versus $15. So that's where a lot of our conversations are with our distributors and with retail, and just trying to educate people on, everybody's going to make more money if we can figure this out and sell this beer. Obviously, it has to move in order for that to make sense too. But at least from my perspective, I think that's more where the conversation is right now.
Katie, you touched on it at the beginning in your opening statement about kind of what accounts are looking for and everything, but throughout these whole conversations, we're kind of touching on what breweries need to be doing or to help with their draft or help the industry overall. Is there anything that you're hearing that are big headaches or things that accounts really want brewers to know? A lot of the people listening or here really should be in the know on when it comes to either just getting draft on handles or making sure that relationship is as good as it needs to be.
I think they said it pretty critically and key in the first panel that we need to get back out there and support our businesses again. Going and having lunch, even if I'm notorious for going to accounts and drinking iced tea at the bar and having a sandwich because I don't like to drink during the day and drive in my car all afternoon, right? But going up and showing and supporting their business and doing things like supporting them on social media when appropriate, asking if you can have little table tents or flyers made, or again, I use the example of part of my expense accounts almost always go to buying something of, a coffee or a breakfast for the staff or whatever. All those little things add up and they make a difference, and people buy from people. They really and truly do. And the right on-premise partner will pay attention to that stuff. And I think the other thing that we could all use a little re-lesson on is some places you should just stop spinning your wheels, right? There are some people that are either set with their draft list and they're happy with it and that is just fine for them, or they don't like this particular style or this, whatever it is. If you're asking the right questions from your buyers and gaining that information, you know how to spend your time there as a supplier or as a distributor. And sometimes you just have to wave the white flag and train your account and say, I am 100% available to you by phone, email, text message if you want to set up an appointment. Otherwise, maybe I'll just come see you every other week. And that is okay because you can still be available, you can still provide the service, but you're going to stop spinning your wheels and invest your time with a supplier and an account that will make more sense long term. It is okay to wave the white flag every so often and just accept where you may not sell a keg. Go spend your time where you're going to sell to.
We have a little under 10 minutes left, so I want to focus on the future. How are we going to try to change trends? What is working or not working? Dave, have you implemented, you talked about food is working to bring in some consumers. Have you implemented any other strategies to try to encourage people to be drinking Ska on draft?
Yeah, I think I mentioned the seasonal thing earlier. I think what we need to do as a supplier is kind of dial in our seasonal portfolio where we don't necessarily, and we've got hopefully something in place this fall that we'll see if it works, where we maybe don't lose our Mexican lager seasonal handles, until the next summer. But being able to keep that year round with seasonals. But seasonals, I think, are a key thing. The other key thing I think that's worth talking about is we've seen, so a lot of, at least in Colorado, probably everywhere, bars and restaurants, they're cash strapped at the same time. So even if you're getting something for less or over time you're paying less, the cash flow issue, at least from an owner's perspective or a buyer's perspective, everybody should understand this. If they're a buyer at a bar or a restaurant, maybe right now at this point in time, a smart thing to do is start looking at sixtels, and maybe paying a little bit more over the long term, but a little bit less more frequently. And it's almost like a credit card. You buy 3 sixtels and you pay weekly and you pay a little interest charge. It's a little more expensive, but you're not dumping out that lump sum of cash, every once a month or once, however often it is you sell a half barrel. It's like a payment plan. It might be worth that for people. I know we're doing that as a business right now with our supplies. We had a conversation about it just this morning, talking about 6-pack rings. Do we need 2 years worth of 6-pack rings because we get a better price? No, let's get 3 months and pay a dime more and just get through this cash flow crunch. So I think sixtels, and we're actually, we're up in sixtels and slightly down in half barrels right now. And I think the proof is in the pudding there. It's real. I hate to tell people to do the things that I think might work for us that I feel like we're really talking about, but those are the 2 things I think that are kind of big on draft for us right now, is working on that seasonal draft and things like a smaller package. And it's the same thing you said, there's, with the rotation world and even space or whatever it might be, or even diversity, a smaller package as far as draft goes still might be a really smart thing to do. We're definitely focusing on that right now.
Karen, you bring a unique perspective because you both have this kind of niche product that's gluten-free, but you also, Holidaily was founded in 2016, so I guess like half of your life has been in this more package-focused industry environment. What are you doing to not only encourage Holidaily consumers to drink that on draft, but also retailers to bring you on and get a draft handle?
I love that you thought 8 years was half of my life, so we're going to start there. Yeah, we're doing a couple of things. Really what we're optimistic about is a lot of younger beer drinkers and even older beer drinkers. Seltzer's been hot for a while, and people are finding that they care about what's in their product or how it makes them feel. And more people are discovering that gluten-free makes them feel a little bit better. They're saying 30% of the population is eliminating gluten from their diet. That's a heck of a lot bigger than 1%, which is celiac disease. So we are really aiming at getting people to know that there's a gluten-free beer option out there. I think, they think, oh, I'll drink a seltzer or a cocktail or wine. And when they're ready for a beer, Holidaily wants to be the one that they think of. So we want to be the leader and obvious choice of the whole category. And we continue to push that. And I think draft and on-premise is a really big place that we can do that. A lot of bars, restaurants have a $2 extra hamburger that's gluten-free. They need to have a beer that goes with it. And so that's really where we lead our conversations and push the draft piece. And like I said, it's huge to us because then people learn about it, and then they go buy it, hopefully at Whole Foods or in the store. And I will say one other thing. I was at a restaurant, 2 weeks ago, and there was, and I think you guys talked about it earlier, but like wine on draft or cocktails, Jason was talking about it. And Johnny and Chaz got a text from me freaking out, like, we have to do something about this right now. This can't happen. We have to save these taps for beer. And I think just the biggest way for all of us to do that, and this was alluded to earlier, we've got to be innovative and we've got to be making products that attract everybody and these younger groups. And hopefully Holidaily can help be a leader in that. A, in the gluten-free piece, B, we're women-owned, and we really lead with that because that, they're saying, oh, your story and diversity and better for you is really where a lot of people are looking at brands right now, and so we lead with that in every single conversation.
Katie, what are you hearing? What are people implementing? What strategies are out there that seem to be working or helping to encourage more draft sales?
I think everybody's kind of picked apart something, and I will just echo back in that value statement in the and question and figuring out what your retailers and on-premise people want that helps their business. Because if you're asking the right question, a keg from brewery A might work better here, but brewery B over there, and listening and intaking that information and making intelligent sales pitches back. I tell a lot of our newer reps that it's okay to have a moment of awkward silence to really intake what somebody said to you. And I do believe very much that innovation is a key and critical component to this business. This is how we were all founded. This is how we were successful, right? Is because we came as disruptors to a category. So we can still focus, again, on something that helped build this. Why all of these people in this lovely room are here is we were disruptors and we were critical thinkers and we like to have fun. Like, let's get back to fun. I know that last year when JABF came back, one of my coworkers, dear friend of mine, he and I were kind of the counterparts in the sales team between the Denver and Highlands area. And he and I had done JABF for years in many of our lives because we've been supplier reps, we've been buyers. He and I kind of did the whole thing. And he and I sat and looked at each other and we were like, it's like the world forgot how to JABF. Why are we explaining this to everybody? Like, and I felt this year was a little different. I felt like people came to me a little bit more that didn't last year. And so we can just kind of have fun again and think of the quirky things and go out and support and get together. I have many friends in this room who are with different distributors or suppliers that we don't work with, and that is okay. That is truly okay, because a rising tide will lift all boats, and we can, as a collective group, if we're all out there preaching the same message and if we're all educating one another and we're making our consumers smarter, we can move the needle. I have a lot of friends from college that have nothing to do with this business. We've been friends for 20 years, and a lot of them still really don't understand what I do for a living. And then they make what I feel are poor choices in their purchase in beer, and I see it in their refrigerators, and they will find that I just take it away from them and replace it with some of our brands. And then they're like, well, this is really good too. I'm like, yeah, I know, you're welcome. Like, make that choice when you use your dollars next time. And so you can just have personality, right? Like, that's how half of us are here. I remember coming to Brew Talks years ago because I love listening to Sam tell a story. And I still love listening to Sam tell a story. And it is why I am here, and I think why a lot of us are here. And so let's just talk about that.
Look at that, just putting a nice little bow on that for us, Katie. I appreciate it. I know, mic drop, that's it. Beautiful.
Mic drop, can I go off stage now?
Well, listen, you guys all kind of have a presence at GABF this year, right? So everyone can come kind of check you guys out, see you on the floor. As things kick off this year, I want to say thank you guys again, and thank you guys for our final Brew Talks of 2023. Round of applause for all of our panelists. Thank you again to our presenting sponsor, Dogfish Head. Can't do it without them. And to our additional sponsors, ePremise, Encompass, and Raise. We can't do it without any of you. We can't do it without all of you here in person and watching on the live stream. To our beautiful AV team that is making me sound beautiful, I hope. Now let's go drink some beers and enjoy the rest of GABF. Thank you, guys.